the gratitude movement is now a thing. There's gratitude journals and they teach gratitude at, higher universities. And yet we still have so far to go, like, can we keep our attention on all that we already have? That's abundance rather than to be wanting more.
Oh, it's such an honor to have Terces and Matthew Engelhart here today. And Terces and I have been busily working on a program that we're going to do together in June at their wonderful farm, the Be Love Farm. And as we were working on that, she just kind of like dropped little tidbits about her story and dropped little tidbits, about, the beginnings of Café Gratitude and her love story. And I was just like, we have to have her on the podcast. Work is love made visible. Here's a story that absolutely fits that bill. So I wanted to just start by asking about your love story. If you would share with us your love story and where it came in your lives, and what it meant to you at the time and what it birthed.
So, okay, I'll go first and then Matthew can add to that. So, my background is I actually came through abuse I was a competitive athlete, abuse as a teenager, and then lived with addiction, eating disorder for 20 years. And I had 3 marriages, 3 children, and I didn't meet Matthew until I was in my 50s. And I really had this idea that and I thought maybe I'm just not gonna find my partner in this lifetime. All I ever really wanted to do was have a lifetime partner, have children, raise a family, and partnership for me was probably, at the top of my list, and yet I'd failed 3 times. Now, admittedly, I was an addict in all of those relationships, and I also married addicts, so the odds probably weren't that good, weren't in my favor. But I met Matthew when I was a little over 50. Matthew's younger than I am. And we started just great friends. I was working for a transformational organization in San Francisco, and he had gone through a divorce not that long ago and had moved to San Francisco from upstate New York. And we were just buds. He had a girlfriend, I had a boyfriend. And then, one day he just said, I realize I'd like to have a more committed relationship with you. And I was like, you're so not my type. And he was, what do you mean I'm not you type? We're best friends. And really, we've been together ever since then. We got married when I was 52. We started Café Gratitude when I was 54. And this year is our 20th anniversary. So, it's not your classic love story. And it's been a beautiful relationship. We believe that the context for a relationship is not one of comfort or ease or security, but that relationship can be used as an opportunity to awaken, to learn to love more deeply, more unconditionally. So, yeah, it's been a journey, and yeah, he's still my favorite person in the whole world. So, yeah. What about you? Anything you want to add to that?
Well, we have a saying: if you want comfort, get a dog. Don't get a relationship, because how we see relationship is how you want to expose your ego to the bone. Get in relationship. It's all going to be right there. It's you're inviting a 24/7 emotional egoic mirror into your life, and so it's not a path for the timid. And yeah, I I was divorced. I was in my rebound relationship, and I thought Tercy was too old for me or whatever. I had some some conversation anyway, but I realized, wow, I could hang out with this being for my whole life. I better get on the mat there and get down there and ask her. So yeah, that was pretty much it.
I'm such
And,
a sucker for a love story. I'm already like tearing up. Tosi, sorry, you were going to add something.
You were going to add something.
and well, I was just going to say, and we both had grown children. So our children, between us, there's 5. So we're a blended family. We each had a Molly, and they're born a couple of weeks apart from each other in actually similar areas in the United States. And then my oldest son is Matthew, and he's Matthew. So it's just this kind of really sweet. They're all best friends. They all get along. We've all been in business together. Um, and yeah, it's it's not been without its challenges, but then most things that are worthwhile do have challenges. And we didn't have children together, but our business, Café Gratitude and Gracias Madre, is what we birthed together, and that's really been our passion and commitment up until now. Was what we focused on, is building community. And we have 13, soon to be 14 grandchildren, so it's a big extended family now, which is what I always wanted.
So now the birth story. Can you tell us the birth story? The birth story of Café
Café Gratitude.
Gratitude. Yeah.
Do you want to start?
And how that arose actually from your love, from that best friends, from the commitment that you made, and where that child was, how that child was conceived. We have to have the conception story and then birth.
So when we got together, we were kind of looking for the next thing. And there was a time when we both thought we would take on leadership roles in landmark education. But we saw it by doing that, we wouldn't be able to hang out, have much time together, because it's such an incredible commitment. So we were kind of looking for our thing. And one day I was driving around San Francisco and I got this download. We need to invent a board game. And the board game is going to train people in the being of abundance, that human beings are born into a paradigm of scarcity, not enough love, not enough time, not enough money, not enough beauty, not enough. And the ego is, if it in its essence, is not enough. And so yeah, I was just okay, we're going to invite this board game because we'd been trying to enroll people in workshops and seminars. That was our job with Landmark, and it's such a drag to try to sell people a weekend, so to speak. And people are just so resistant to changing their lives. So everyone, a game, like a board game that transforms people, that's easy. We don't have to enroll them in anything. Sit down, roll some dice. So we sat down, and it took about a year. We had started with some index cards and some dice, or a spinner and a blank canvas. And we spent a year inventing this board game called the Abounding River, which trains people, the players, in 6 qualities of spirit, we would say, which are creation responsibility, being responsible for your experience, self-worth as opposed to shame, love acceptance, gratitude, generosity, and abundance, knowing that you are provided for. So that took us about a year, and we engaged an artist to make this incredible board game and cards and everything. And at some point we said, well, how are we going to market this? We don't know how to market a game. And we decided, let's open a restaurant. Everyone has to eat. We'll have the game on the table, and they'll have to play the game. And at the same time, Terci got introduced to, that's when Giuliano, and you're from, said Santa Monica, Giuliano had his restaurant in Santa Monica, I think, or the raw food thing was kind of just picking up, just starting. And we went to Hawaii and tried a raw food diet for a while and felt really good, and said, okay, I guess it's going to be a raw food gaming parlor. And that could fail. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we practiced on our friends for about 3 months, making food, inviting them all in, and one day our friend who liked free stuff, she was all about free stuff, said, well, when are you going to open this restaurant? You keep talking about it. I said to her, Henri, when we get a sign from God, we're going to open the restaurant. And literally the next day, we were driving from the Alamany Farmers Market to our house, and there was a sign on a
Building.
commercial space in the Mission, 20th and Harrison, or 20th and Harrison. Was it 22nd and Harrison? 20,
I think.
that said restaurant for sale. And literally, we looked at it, we bought it, we opened, and that was the beginning of a insanely crazy social experiment called Café Gratitude.
And one thing he left out was when we got married and we were looking at what's next, we kind of made this agreement. We're just going to trust wherever we're led. So we're not going to try to, you know, uh,
Strategize.
strategize out a life. We're just going to listen and trust and follow. So the whole notion of inventing a board game seemed very bizarre. We didn't even play games, but we knew that whatever we did, we wanted it to be transformational. So we explored a few transformational board games that were out there, and we discovered that they were really hard and difficult. And so anyway, that was kind of what led us to, all right, let's just sit down and create something that's fun. And it's interesting. It's we've sold out of it. It's no longer in print, but you can get them on eBay, and they pop up every now and then wherever we are. We just did a trip to Idaho, and somebody brought the game for everybody to play. So yeah, and it's super moving. It's super fun. And but
So in the early days of the restaurant, when it was all on the table, you'd walk up, you'd walk up to a table, and the someone had just pulled the card. What do you love about your mother? And someone would be weeping, either because they couldn't think of anything, or they could think of a lot. Didn't matter. And you deliver their soup, and it was just a wild. The first couple years was not about a commercial venture. It was just about this crazy social experiment, especially with the staff. I mean, the connection we have with the early staff is still, it's super connected. And
we're like family, really.
yeah, it was just wild.
And the other thing is the names of dishes on the menus are affirmations. And people thought that was super weird, but people also came in because it might be the most positive interaction they had all day in their life. Like this one very wealthy businessman who's still a dear friend of ours, he used to come in just to have somebody deliver food to him and say, you are divine, you are loved.
You are
Yeah,
happy.
you are happy. It didn't matter. He's a high powered,
Real estate.
high finance real estate investor in San Francisco. And he would come in just to be exposed to a language that wasn't really a part of his day-to-day life. So do you want to tell him the story about the policeman?
So
Get close. You have to.
early on, it was like day 7 or something, because that corner in the Mission where we opened the restaurant the restaurant had been closed and gotten kind of gangy, and a lot of people hanging out. The police were always kind of breaking up groups. And so the police walk in, and they kind of look around like, what's going on here? And they look up at the menu. It was all on the wall. And a cappuccino was "I am loved." So you have to order. He said, I am loved. He goes, I am loved. Nobody said that in years. Oh, wow. Wow, there's something going on. And they were like, when I got that the police got that something was going on here, I knew, we were on to something.
I have my own story of like dragging my kids there on Mother's Day, thinking, okay, this is the best place to take them for Mother's Day. I was vegan. None of them were. They were like, what are you doing? You're taking us to a vegan restaurant. And they sat down and it is one of the only vegan restaurants where I took my kids, where they're like, oh, this is really good. I can eat this. And then of course we had all the prompts so I could receive them.
Well, a
um,
lot of that, even people who, we had this question of the day which is, the experience in the cafe was intended to be like a live expression of the game. So a lot of the elements from the game we incorporated into the environment, the culture of the restaurant. And so they people would ask the question of the day, which might be, like Matthew was saying, what do you love about your mother? What would you like to be forgiven for? It could be any number of things. And we would ask that at the tables. And even if people resisted it, like, I don't want to hear the question of the day, it was fine. We didn't force it on anyone, but that we have so many stories of those people kind of coming around and then asking us to make sure that we ask them the question of the day. Because part of what we were doing was just breaking down those, kind of crusty walls of separation and helping people actually get in their hearts instead of living in their minds, but like really feel their hearts. And like Matthew said, it was a it was a bizarre experiment that happened to do well. It's a diluted version now of the early days, and it's still a powerful expression. But yeah, anyway,
so
that's
yeah,
how it got started.
yeah, you have this crazy idea. And like we have a lot of entrepreneurs who listen to this podcast. So you have this crazy idea and you go, okay, we're going for it. You have this experience where it sounds like there was this aliveness, like with the staff and with the customers and these moments of transformation. But you use those words, but it wasn't a commercial venture. So, like every question the entrepreneur asks is, where did the money come from? Like, how did you fund this? Like, how did you get it going? And
Well,
how did you keep it going?
Well,
in the early days, we sunk all of our, Matthew had sold a business. We sunk all of our money into it. And really, like, honestly, how San Francisco kind of imploded and Los Angeles exploded was, we had built such a tight-knit community. It never occurred to us that we would ever have to defend our culture or defend our we just never occurred to us. We shared money equally.
I mean
People were
tips, not money.
tips. People were, a part of, everything that we did, the culture. We were really close knit. And then there came a time where it just took a couple of people and a kind of aggressive lawyer and who wanted to try to create a class action suit. And, what they questioned was this gray area of tip sharing, which is still a gray area in the restaurant business. There's the by the letter of the law, only the people that touch the table have the right to the tips. But we did this, thing where everybody who by the law gets tips voted every year whether they wanted to continue to share it with the back of the house. And, we always did. But then it just took a few people and like I said, an assertive lawyer. So then all of a sudden we were dealing with lawsuits and we hadn't set ourselves up to defend the entity. And that's really what caused, several closures. We sold the building. At that time, we had, I don't know, 7 or 8 restaurants up here, and we were utilizing a central kitchen model, and we lived above the central kitchen. So ultimately, we sold that building. We only kept the restaurants open that could manage with an independent kitchen and didn't need the centralized food production. And then slowly, but interestingly enough, while that was happening, someone came up here who fell in love with the idea and the concept and wanted to bring it to Los Angeles. And we ended up creating a partnership. And that's how we ended up with 7 restaurants in LA. So, I think it's important for entrepreneurs to realize that failure is probably inevitable, and oftentimes it's out of failure that the next thing is birthed.
And,
And you just have to not quit, not give up, not quit.
and we have a ceremony, kind of a ceremony that we do before we start something called getting complete with failure. So you sit down and you say, okay, we're going to put all of our nest egg in a raw food gaming parlor. That could fail. Okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? We'd lose all our money. We'd we'd be
Live in a van down by
we'd
the
live in a
river.
van down by the river. We would have to deal with we failed. Like you just go through all of the stuff. Like, okay, is it worth the risk? Are you willing to throw your hat over the wall? This is the possible downside. This is the upside. But are you willing? Are you want to trust spirit? Or are you going to trust your calculating intellect? And there's no right or wrong. It's just it,
What you choose.
it's what you choose, and uh, there's an aliveness to a passion project that is way more fun to live than the calculated. And you hope your passion project becomes, a money machine or abundant machine. Yeah, there's no question about that. But you just have to be willing to fail, because if you can't embrace failure, you're going to do desperate things to keep it going for too long, and that's going to take you way down. You'll borrow money from the mob. You're really desperate. You'll borrow money from the street, and they'll come break your ankles if you don't pay it back. So, you're going to get complete with failure before you start.
That makes me want to ask, do you have any mob connections? We could probably use them.
Sorry?
Do you have any mob connections?
No.
Oh, okay.
No mob connection.
That was a joke. I first of all, I'm realizing as I'm listening that I went to, I guess it was Café Gratitude in the Mission back. Let me see if the mic's a little too far. Is that better? Can you hear me better? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I realize now it was Café Gratitude in the Mission. For some reason I was thinking you started in Los Angeles, but now I'm going back to a memory 20 years ago or ish, when a friend took me to this great restaurant in the Mission, and it was a slightly
That's the
harrowing
original
walk.
one. That's it.
Yeah, that's fun to remember that.
That's funny because on this Idaho trip, this woman shows up with a photograph, like a developed photograph, pre-cell phone of 2004 with Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers, her daughter and herself. And in the background is this little electric gem that we used to run produce from our house over to the cafe, and we parked it on the sidewalk. And it's like she bought the game then, and she's the one that brought the game to this community dinner, and we all played it. But it's wild how many people that little place impacted in the years that it was open, because it was just so, yeah, it was so unique, so bizarre.
Yeah.
That's where we first met. Miriam, I know I connected you up with Chip Conley. Chip Conley was a customer and became a mentor because he was involved in Joie de Vie. And yeah, wild what that little thing produced. It's still
those
producing.
threads. Yeah, the threads of our impact
Yeah.
throughout our lives, they come back.
Some of those original employees, they call for coaching from time to time. And we were just talking to one of them. It was like, really, we kind of took a small collection of almost unemployable people. We were just like, this will be a great experiment. If we teach them to keep their attention on being grateful, what might happen? And this one, kind of little street gypsy nymph fairy called us for coaching the other day, and she just bought a house, and
She opened her own restaurant.
She opened her own restaurant up in
Grass
Valley, and her daughter, who was the first baby born in this first initial community, is in high school, right? And because it was like 19 years ago. Yeah, amazing.
So amazing. Okay, I got a question. You've used a word, transformation. And I'm wondering what that word means for you now, and how the meaning for you might have transformed over the years, back from, you mentioned landmark, to, becoming entrepreneurs. So how is that word, what does it mean for you now? How has the word transformed in its meaning for you?
Well, I think kind of the definition I set with for a long time is, it's when something becomes possible that you actually never saw as possible before. So, for example, my marriage to Matthew, I was pretty much like, okay, well, I don't know that I'm going to try this again. It just felt like whatever skill set I had, whatever ability I had, somehow it wasn't working. And I couldn't imagine how it might again. And then for me, the transformation was shifting my idea or context of what marriage was. So, considering that marriage is actually an opportunity to cause the greatness in someone else to rise up or shine forth. Like, we create one another. It's not about trying to find the right person that fits you know,
Needs.
your qualifications, or we hear that a lot of young people because we coach a lot of young people. I'm looking for somebody da 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 da. But what if it's not that at all? What if it's you get to create who that person is in the way you think and speak and feel and the attitudes you have? And that was a transformation which allowed for the possibility of relationship to show up in my life again. So that would be transformation for me. What about you?
I would say it's currently, um, it's removing the obstacles to love. That divine love is already burning strong and bright within us, and it's just shrouded. And that transformation is just um, getting closer to reality through mostly through death, through humility, death, sacrifice, like that. It requires it's an emptying
Humble.
uh, rather than a filling up, and yeah.
Now, I
And
was
like for
wondering when you talk.
example,
Oh,
for
go ahead.
example, in those early employees, those were people that didn't hold down a job, so to speak. Some of them lived in cars or vans. Some of them were, what are those people that dive in garbage cans?
Dumpster divers.
Dumpster divers. It was just a unique group of people. And yet we would acknowledge those people for who we saw them as, that they couldn't see in themselves. The qualities of leadership, for example, and those people did rise up. One of those people became our executive chef of our most successful restaurant in West Hollywood. So, it's like it's as if a future becomes possible that you never thought was possible before.
It's good.
I love that. I'm. I think the world could. I think we all agree the world could use a little bit more. Could use a little dose of transformation right now.
We would agree with you.
If it keeps going the way we're thinking it's going, we're in trouble.
Yeah, maybe a big dose.
A big dose. Yeah, yeah. I'm a man of understatement. Miriam, you want to jump back in?
Yeah, I think the thing that's really with me is, the surface version of looking at Cafe Gratitude or looking at Be Love Farm could be one of, that Californian, oh, it's all about love and joy. And, they don't know the real, all my problems. Yet the constant theme I'm hearing here is in your marriage that it's not about comfort, it's about discomfort. And that transformation is actually about death, and what comes with death, humility, letting go. And I'm wondering whether you can, and also that business is about coming to terms with failure. So I'm really hearing that as a strong theme throughout. And I'm wondering whether you could share with us a story about death, letting go, failure, that has happened through your journey together.
Well, when we got sued by our employees about the tip sharing thing, and it felt like a huge betrayal, and the death was to let go but not stop caring, because you could go to I don't give an F, or you could, but it was like so first of all, use the opportunity. It's like a psychological gymnasium. Okay, betrayal. There's something here for me to learn. Okay, and our experience is as you go up, as you advance in consciousness, the betrayal, the betrayals get the betrayal ordeals increase in intensity because there's more to die to. You're okay. You learned that one. Now die to this. Now die to this. I mean, if you look at the story of Jesus, it's the ultimate betrayal, right? So, but he was a master. He was such a master that he could say, "Forgive them, Father. They know not what they do." Well, that's our job. All of us. That's our job. Forgive them, Father. They know not what they do. They got caught up in matter. They got caught up in fear. You know, for the last 2 years, I've been sort of insane, like let's just say not really happy with our government and Dr. Fauci and all that stuff. But now I can say, oh, forgive them, Father. They know that what do. Like they're caught up in greed. They're caught up in fear. They're caught up like, I don't need to jump on this fear bandwagon too. So, so not engage, but not stop caring. Because the other way is just go to cynicism, go to, I don't care. So we had this betrayal, and with lawsuits, and I don't know if you've ever been in a lawsuit, but it consumes your life. It's horrible. It's lawyers. First of all, you're paying for pain. You're paying for depositions. You're paying for people lying, and it's just so to not go to cynicism or anger or anything. Just like, okay, this is my lesson. There's love exists here. So forgive them, Father. They know not what they do. That's that's very transformational. And I expect that those kind of things will continue because for that very reason.
Yeah, and I would say that, it's ongoing. I mean, now we have legal counsel. Now we have, but we almost always have at least one lawsuit going. The existing company, we almost always have. It's part of navigating business and people. And another big one for us was when we started the restaurant, we were eating raw food diet, and then, in winter we added soup and quinoa and rice. That was kind of how we navigated the early days. And then, let's see. And then Matthew and I, we moved to the farm, which was just a piece of land. We lived in a yurt for 8 years and kind of camped out. And we were both avoiding being the public face of Café Gratitude and Gracias Madre, and kind of giving Los Angeles an opportunity to birth. Our kids went down and helped start that. And, what happened is we began to add, dairy and eggs and some meat into our diet. And then this whole thing blew up again. You can look it up. It's called Slaughtergate. And we actually got more publicity for beginning to not be vegan on our own farm in our own diet, nothing to do with the restaurants, than we did for all the good that Cafe Gratitude ever did. Who was the person who
it went national? It was on Rush Limbaugh.
It went around the world. It was like we had
CBS
trucks outside our farm here, which was
protests at the restaurant.
It was crazy.
Death threats. Just because Ma and Pa Vegan had started eating animal protein.
And what we realized was, when people create leaders, because really you're not a leader unless there's people looking up to you. People create you as a leader. When people create you as a leader, and then if you change your mind or change your path, it lives for them like a betrayal. Like you've let them down.
Or you've led them down a path.
And so, that was another huge, again, we had to like lay low, get out of the limelight, even though we were the ones that came forward with it. We were the ones that were transparent. We weren't hiding it. We were saying, wow, it's difficult after all these years. And, but for us, it was, I still think that a plant-based diet is a very healthy alternative, and especially important if you're shifting from a conventional diet into a more conscious, aware diet. I totally support that. For us, living on the farm in winter outdoors, we needed more
Well,
heat
but also just
and regenerative
what
farming.
animals provide in the
Yeah.
in the regenerative farming model is, you know, not, if you're going to use nature as your model for farming, nature wouldn't be very natural without animals. Natural farming wouldn't be very natural without animals. Animals provide ecological services that we can't get any other way. That doesn't mean that if you don't have access to righteous animal protein, yeah, plant based is definitely the way to go. But that, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not an all or nothing. And plant based vegan people tend to be quite black and white. Human beings tend to be quite black and white. We don't have much tolerance for gray, but there's a lot. Life is mostly gray.
Well, I think that's partly because people are looking outside of themselves for something to believe in. That they believe that they look outside of themselves, because you can see it everywhere. Failures in churches, failures in, you know, administration, failure. It doesn't matter. It's historically it's everywhere, because I think we keep looking outside of ourselves for something to hold on to for stability, rather than do the deep inner work to get that it's in you, that sense of belonging, trust, stability, and you may shift what you invest your time and your energy and your awareness in. But I also think these are great lessons in teaching us to be non-judgmental. I mean, right now I think I've certainly never lived in my, 70 plus years. I've never lived at a time where there was so much divisiveness in just our own country, let alone the world. I've never seen this be people be so oppositional. But I think we're in a big lesson to learn. Are we going to learn to love unconditionally, or are we going to just stay in our own camp and fight the guys in the other camp? I think that's a huge lesson that's up for us as a people right now. And a lot of people don't even want to hear that. They're just they're so in their camp that they're just ready to fight whatever it might be. But I think we have to learn to see the other side and to be okay with disagreeing.
Uh, another another really like area that I'm super interested in is because you started with this idea of abundance, and I'm so fascinated with people like yourselves who's devoted so much to abundance and gratitude. And how does that interact with systems of oppression, in your opinion? Like, so
With
often
what?
I've kind of
Systems
like,
of oppression.
with systems of oppression, like people who are like, yeah, you can feel like you're you have gratitude, but we've been oppressed. We're actually in this system of oppression, a systemic oppression, or what is
The
how
freest people living in those systems of oppression are the ones that are grateful and less identified. And this is fully demonstrated by that guy that was in one of the camps in Germany, Frankel, what's his name?
Frankel?
Something Frankel,
Yeah.
who, wrote this whole thing about, it's very famous. I can't remember his name, but I could bring 100 examples of, um, the victim consciousness, no matter what, whether you're a victim of your mother or your society, there's no win. There's no win there. There's no freedom there. It just doesn't make a difference. And because life is an inside job, because our spirit, our Atman, however you want to say it, is what's really, really real. Our job is to go be anchored there. And I'm not saying there aren't systems of oppression. I'm just saying no matter what the circumstances of your life are, circumstances don't create happiness. Elvis Presley and Robin Williams and
Marilyn Monroe.
what's her name? Winehouse?
Oh, Amy
Amy,
Winehouse.
all prove that you could have all the talent and money in the world. It makes no difference. Okay. Life is an inside job, no matter what. no matter what your circumstances are. So we have to stop buying into, yes, I'm sorry you've had that experience, not to have any less compassion, but always bring it back to life is an in-time job, love is an indwelling presence.
And I think, Miriam, too, what we saw in the early days was the people who could develop being grateful, regardless of their circumstances, flourished. And the people who couldn't develop being grateful, no matter what their circumstances were, struggled. And so, of course, it's awesome if circumstances change, but you don't want your life to rely on the circumstances. And so if you can do the work, I mean, we work with, you'll meet some of these women. We work with these women from City of Refuge in Sacramento. Some of them have the most horrific backgrounds and stories of oppression. And yet, living in that place of being grateful and contributing, I think it's important for people to see that they are a contribution regardless of their circumstances, more than it is solving the circumstances. Because if we go in to solve the circumstances of somebody, we're actually saying you need our help. Whereas if somebody's able to do that work, to actually get how amazing and blessed they are, the truth is the circumstances do shift. But you can't be doing it in order to get the circumstances to shift, because that would be like manipulation. So yeah, it's a tricky thing. I mean, a good example, in these lawsuits we went through, these people felt that we were oppressing them in a sense, right? The reality is, by the time we got through all of this and lawyers promised them great things, they would have been better off if they just kept working and kept being paid and been a part of that community. It would have been better off. However, they contributed an enormous amount to us because we learned to let go and surrender and still care. We reorganize. I mean, the whole thing. So I think we just have to realize that it's not about the outer, that it's about the inner, and we all have the opportunity and the potential to do that work and to shift our experience of our situation, even if our situation doesn't change.
I'll tell you a story from the cafe that embodies this. So guy comes in and he orders a cup of Earl Grey tea, and we had I hope we still carry it, but we had really good Earl Grey tea back then, and he's drinking it, and
it was like $3.
$3.
And he put the change in the jar.
Oh, you're telling a different one. So he it was $3. He puts a $5 in the jar, so he tips $2. So he tips, I don't know what percent that is, 68. Is that no 66%? I think it is. Anyway, we go check on him. He goes, this is really good Earl Grey. It's not bergamot oil, it's bergamot fruit. He tells us all about bergamot and distinctions in bergamot. And he leaves. He enjoys his cup of tea, like, oh my God, best cup of tea, like completely embraces that cup of tea. He leaves. At the end of the night, Tercy would do the books. We'd have this woman, Maria, would clean up. I would pass out on the bench until Tercy finished the books. Then we would take the leftover rice and quinoa and give it to some homeless people on the street. That night, the same night, this guy T came in. There was a guy lying in the street. I went over. I brought him this box of quinoa. He looked up, and it was the guy that had got the tea, that had given the 66% tip. So here's a homeless guy that completely zenned out on the tea, and and gave, I don't know how much, what percentage of his net worth for as gratitude as a gratuity. So
You would say that's abundant.
Yeah, so that's abundance. That's like, oh my God, doesn't he? The guy was enjoying his whatever circumstances he had, because life's an inside job.
It reminds me of, like, Lynn Twist, right? Fundraising from the heart. Lynn Twist.
A little louder, please.
Sorry, let me see. How's it now?
You better.
Interesting. We'll cut that out. Do you know Lynn Twist?
Yeah, I
Very
know her
well.
well.
Fundraising.
She's a friend.
I think it's in her workshop. She reminds us that people with less income tend to give more of their income percentage wise to charity causes.
Yeah.
And it's that very thing that you're talking about in terms of it's our relationship with the money, it's our relationship with the system that affects our ability to give or to contribute, or something I
There's
always
an
try to remember when I'm in that scarcity place, which is so easy to fall into in our world, that there are people out there that are giving so much more than I am, that have so much less in whatever way they
there's
can.
another there's another story that she tells that's worth hearing if you haven't heard, and that is that she's in she used to run the Hunger Project for Werner Erhard, and she's in India at Mother Teresa's orphanage, and these rich Indian donors come, and Mother Teresa's waiting on them hand and foot, and they're being quite arrogant. And Mother Teresa, bring me tea. Mother Teresa, bring me this. And Mother Teresa's running all around. And Lynn Twist is just getting more and more and more angry and infuriated. Like, these people are so arrogant. Don't they know who she is? Blah, 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 blah. They finally leave. And Lynn Twist just busts out, Mother Teresa, how could you stand those people? And she says, Lynn, how come you have so much compassion and love for the physically impoverished and no capacity to love the spiritually impoverished? And she got it, like, oh my God. But that's how we operate. Like, we operate like just having physical wealth has something together, but suffering, suicide rates are much higher in first world
Developed.
countries. So emotional pain is much more intense than physical pain. So if you're in survival mode, yes, you're suffering, of course, but you're not necessarily going to tend towards taking your life. But when you're sitting in a place of comfort, and that all your demons are fully being, you have time to, like, digest your demons or not. That's where real agony and pain can be experienced.
Yeah,
We had this experience. We were in India, and I remember having this awareness that we see all this poverty, but one of the most powerful ways we could impact that was those of us who live in the West who have our basic needs met and who have more. If we would just be grateful for what we have, that would have a powerful impact on those that don't have, because grateful people do generous things with their money resources. And that's the motivation kind of behind Cafe Gratitude is, when we started this, there was no gratitude movement. There was no commercial almond milk. We used to have to explain to people, how do you get milk out of an almond? And there was no cold brew or cold processed coffee. We were filtering coffee through a wool filter. And the gratitude movement is now a thing. There's gratitude journals, and they teach gratitude at, higher universities, and yet we still have so far to go. Like, can we keep our attention on all that we already have? That's abundance, rather than to be wanting more. And it's tricky because culturally, I think our society models more is better. But if we really look, there's no evidence for that. There's no evidence that more is better. And I think more of us have to live in the flow, that money flows, and resources. Time is the most precious of all resources. Money, time, energy flows through us. And that the more we hoard, or the more we hold on to, the more we plug up that flow. And that flow is also our life energy.
As you were talking, I was thinking about the there's like two sides of the impact of a material culture. in terms of what Miriam was saying, in terms of privilege and oppression, that on one side there's the accumulation of way too much and the hoarding, and on the other side is the belief that we're going to rescue other people in the world through our material culture.
Yeah.
And what I hear you pointing to is that we need to step out of that model entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually that is about the flow of all the resources that we need, not just giving material abundance to another country. Or we know the impacts of development, of Western styles of development on the so-called underdeveloped world. So I hear this continual invitation, which is it's challenging for me, and it's challenging for me as I think about people that might be hearing this and like reacting from such an embedded place in that materialistic mindset. I'm projecting that out from myself to hear that and trust, and like, how do I trust that when the world is continually telling me that either I need to hoard more or I need to give more of that material abundance away in order to save other people? How do I trust that it's actually not about that? It's about
Well,
Cons-
this thing called
I think
gratitude.
what's important is that it's not in order to save people, it is to stay in the flow. So, it's like, let's just say you're playing poker. Well, if you're playing poker for no money, that's a particular game. But if you're playing poker for all you have, that's a very different game. That's a very different experience. And there's an aliveness to that experience because you've got more at risk, more
skin in
at
the game.
stake. You've got, yeah. So that's the question. We always tell people, if you're going to give a little bit more than you're comfortable with, because you want to keep yourself in discomfort, because that's where you're awake. And, you could say we've just all fallen asleep, and we think that we're, we're like cocky enough to think that we're going to save someone else. No, love them for who they are. They'll be able to navigate their life. Otherwise, you're just saying, I'm better than you and you need me, which keeps people stuck. We used to have in the Abounding River game, one of the things is give away to the homeless, but don't see them as needy. So the hardest part is to not see them as needy, because that's how arrogant we are, or how afraid of being homeless we are. But the truth is, if you get to know some homeless people, there's some pretty extraordinary people out there that are probably happier with their lives than lots of the people who have all this stuff are.
Yeah, I think
But that's the transformation we're aiming for. That's the transformation. Is usually it's about changing the context of something. Because when you change the context, you change your whole perception. So even the idea that more is better, that's a context we need to change, because nobody's modeling us that more is better.
I think something to consider there is you're not being charitable to save them. You're being charitable to transform your consciousness, that you're not given by circumstances, that you're not given by your bank account, that you're not given by the roof over your head. You're actually giving it away so that you're putting your investment in God or in the divine, or however you want to say that. And it's your, see, when you're giving out of your comfort zone, you're actually squashing your ego. You're squashing your scarcity, because remember, we're born into this paradigm of scarcity. So it's not about saving people at all. Yes, you can relieve their suffering, perhaps momentarily, perhaps, but that's not great. And you should do that, and you should have compassion for them and their situation, absolutely. But the charity is for you, because of you, meaning us, not you personally, Adam.
Modeling that.
Yeah, it's for you to loosen the grips on your materialism, your I am this body, I am this stuff, and you're loosening the grips of that.
And when people die, they model this for us in real physical death. You see people, the struggle of dying is you're trying to hold on to things of this world. And so we could all model more powerfully letting go while we're still alive. It's because we know it's not that makes us happy, but yet we spend more time in the pursuit of that as opposed to what really matters most to us, which is oftentimes the experience of love, loving ourselves, loving others, being
Connected.
being connected, sharing.
I think one
See,
of the hardest. Oh, sorry.
just one more thing. We have a saying somewhere in something we wrote. It says, "We all want to take care of each other, but we're just afraid
To go first.
It's true. I mean, we want to take care of each other. We're just afraid there won't be enough. It won't be reciprocated. But ultimately, living in community, living in family where everyone is for everyone is what we want. We want to belong to that, and we're just afraid to go first. We're afraid that it won't be reciprocated. We're distrustful, and the truth is, yes, not everyone's gonna. We have a leadership course, and one of the things we say is the leader goes first. Leader takes 100% responsibility, and is the most transparent, and it's not going to be, everyone's not going to do the same amount of work. Everyone's not going to take the same amount of responsibility. So what? Where's this? Not everyone has the same skill set. Big deal. If stepping into leadership is giving up that it's going to be equal.
I think personally, where I feel the biggest tug in that is as a parent, because I think that the idea of me creating the security in myself and feeling secure in myself, but then also having people that I'm responsible for providing for, and maybe that's the same as leadership. When you're in a position as a founder and you feel responsible for all the things that you have brought forth. But it's like that's where it's like not just about, and particularly as a parent, it's not just about my security, it's about their security, and that inability to like know where the boundaries of that are, and perhaps that's and I have to say, as a founder of our own organizations, that's where it's so painful. Do you know what I mean? That like, okay, yeah, I'm grieving and I can lay death to myself, but hurting someone else in that death process, that's how that's kind of like where that rub is, for me at least.
Okay, so this is another one that's maybe difficult to difficult to hear, but consider that whatever experience you're having, you're the one that's creating it. And that would also be true for your children. Whatever experience they're having, they're the one that's creating it. Now, mostly we want to take credit for our experience if we like the experience we're having. But when we don't like the experience we're having, we want to blame someone else or some circumstance on it and pull victim. So, teaching our children that you actually see, love can't be hurt. Love just loves. Love always begets more love. So when people say I'm hurt, okay, they don't relate to it like they're choosing hurt, but they actually are. And they could choose something else. But helping our young people get that that's a choice would be a very powerful move for our culture these days. And we say what you think, what you say, what you do, what you believe, and the attitude you have are how you have access to your being, the beingness of human. So if you want to shift who you're being, you shift what you say, what you do, what you think, what you believe, and the attitude. And the beauty of human beings is we're the only creatures that were given free will, free choice. And we don't utilize it most of the time for creating the lives we love. But we have that option. So I think we grow up in this. I'm somehow responsible for someone else's experience, but we then all have to go into recovery to learn, oh, I actually can't be. They're responsible. And part of parenting is helping them take on that responsibility. Not the responsibility to drive a car or to drink, but the responsibility to choose what they think, say, believe, act, and attitude, and how they'll respond to whatever external stimulus there is, so that they're the one that's creating whatever experience they're having.
And the key to your dilemma there is transparency. You just share with your kids your experience. You say,
Sometimes I feel,
yeah, my experience is that I'm selling out on you, or whatever it is. You just, hey, that I'm going to ruin your life, or whatever it is. But you just got to be transparent and not pretend you got it all together. And so I've got this choice to make, and I don't know which is going to impact you most. And
I don't have that problem.
okay, great.
They often hear me. I don't have it together. Here we go. You know what? It's almost impossible as a sole parent. My journey as a sole parent is like, it's impossible. From the very start, I had, I've like, it's impossible. So I'm just going to have to keep developing and
or
being
it's very
transparent.
possible. Like, I bet your kids are great. Like, what's not working?
and that's
maybe what's impossible is the critic in the critic in your head.
Yeah, and I also think, as somebody who was a single parent as well, it's like keeping our attention on what is working instead of always berating ourselves for where we fall short. And there's seasons, and the day will come where you'll look back and you'll see who your children became was oftentimes a result of what you perceived as the hardships you went through. And you just trust that. Yeah.
I wonder if there's a relationship between the word transparent and the word parent. Such a weird thing that I'm thinking about right now as you said it, because you said transparent. Okay, so the choice to move from they hurt me or the circumstances are hurting me to I'm feeling hurt and I have a choice to stay there or to move on, take responsibility for it, and then I have power. That's what I hear. Like, I have power over those feelings, in a way, like in a good way. I'm wondering, like, I don't, in how you explained it, it sounds like you could just snap your fingers and go, okay, I'm taking responsibility for this feeling, and now it's, now I can do something with it. But I don't think that it's that simple, and I'm not sure that you think it's that simple. So I'm wondering how we move, those that want to take responsibility for our feelings when we're hurt, how we make that transition, how we transform from that.
So, Adam, I would say one of the things is that all the stimulus is actually getting that we're supported, that there's something here for us to see and learn. What oftentimes why the response is hurt or anger or disappointment is because something's being triggered, and it's usually from an earlier similar incident, some wound, some incompletion, something. Here we go again. And so that's what you do. It's like, oh, let me look and see what that is. So it's definitely doing more self reflection and the willingness to believe that, oh, I'm actually being supported in healing this. So that person that I perceive as the one who hurt me is actually showing me where I have some wounding or some incompletion. And if I can learn from that, then I'm able to not react in a similar way next time. And it doesn't happen instantly. It takes time and time and time again, because we have a tendency to protect those areas and not let them get exposed. And yet the best thing we can do, that's why we say marriage, where you have this 24/7 mirror, the best thing you can do is let them be exposed so that you have an opportunity to heal them. But we as people want to protect those because we don't want to be hurt. We don't want to be disappointed. We don't want to get angry. But all of those are actually opportunities to support the healing process. So again, you have to transform how you see those. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, you can't just say, oh, let's say impatience, which is kind of my thing, impatience. Um, no, I can't say impatience, go away, snap fingers, and then I'll never be impatient again. It's huge. It's every day just noticing it. Here we go again, saying a prayer, whatever, asking the Divine Mother to dissolve this. Uh, it's but if the same thing keeps happening and happening, it's not about the circumstances. It's just it's all me. So, I mean, you know, addicts. We always talk about addicts hitting the bottom, getting what do they say, in the gutter, like at hit the bottom rung, right? Well, we're all have to hit a bottom rung. When are you? Stop trying to change the circumstances. An addict. We're all addicts trying to change the circumstances so we don't have these experiences. And that is an addiction. It's a false reality. It is, no one has done it. No one has done it ever in the history of humanity. There's four noble truths, right? Nobody's messed with the four noble truths. They're approximately, life is suffering. There's a source of the suffering. The source of suffering is desire, and there's a cessation to desire. Well, okay, it's all in there. Those four, but it, we got to stop. We got to stop looking outside ourselves to find peace, because it won't ever happen. But most human beings haven't hit the gutter, haven't hit the bottom yet, and they're still, they're still drinking. We got to stop drinking from that well.
And that would be a transformation. So the transformation again would be seeing, oh, got it. I mean, we used to say in the restaurant, we still say it. If all we got in was whatever experience you're having, you're the one creating it, huge victory. Because if people actually got that, it would transform how we live our lives and how we treat one another.
And what we did with our lives.
And it certainly transformed yours. That movement of choosing to be together in discomfort.
Yep.
And to go on that journey together, and to continue to kind of move through the obstacles and see them as a gift. Yeah. And our time together has been, such a gift today. For us, and also for our listeners. And I can see Adam's got a last question that he really wants to ask.
I've been waiting.
Here he goes.
I mean, it's not like I haven't been asking questions, but first of all, I want to say, I don't know if this will go on the podcast, and I'm fine if it is, but I completely underestimated you two.
Good.
Not knowing you, and like, just, yeah, that's not meant to be an insult, but you far exceeded my my expectations for what this was going to be like, and who you two are, and what you've done in the world, and who you're being in the world. So I'm really, really grateful that I'm selfishly grateful that I got to meet you and experience you and ask questions, and grateful for people that get to listen to this, even if they know nothing about Café Gratitude, or anything that you've done, that they get to share some of this wisdom in the complexity that you bring it. Which leads me to my question. I can't help but think how privileged we are, me and Miriam, to be here with you today too. To have people in our lives that kind of hold a role at various, not even age based, but hold a role of elder,
Hmm.
right? They bring some wisdom, a bigger wisdom than the webs that we tangle ourselves in on the day-to-day basis, and kind of help us step out of that. I wonder what that word means to you. I don't know if that's a role you feel yourselves in. Again, I'm not basing that on age, but just on perspective. Um, you mentioned coaching, things like that, helping other people in that way. I'm wondering what that word means to you, what that role is for you in our world.
I
The
used to
impact that.
resist it a lot,
Yeah.
but I'm embracing it now. I'm okay with it.
So you are
Yeah,
an
and
elder.
I think that, one of the one of the things that's modeled well in a recovery environment is, people who recover sponsor and support other people through recovery. And it's actually selfish because you get more out of it probably than you put into it. But that's how we grow. And, I've always been somebody who likes to share. And I think that whatever we're given, we consider a gift, and then it's ours to regift, to give back. Um, yeah, and
And when you teach something, you get it
you
for
get it,
yourself in a deeper
yeah,
way anyway. So
another level.
it's you could say it's not selfish, but it has its own reward for sure.
And
And
It's
yeah,
like
we
reciprocity.
we have had that conversation, like, when people come out to the farm, it's like, "Oh, let's go see how grandma and grandpa live." Like, there's some, like, strange way of living that we don't have much exposure to anymore. So, Matthew's always surprised when a full grown man comes out and doesn't know how to light a fire. That's surprising to him. Or,
or
how many people do you know who know how to milk a cow, or even kids that know where chicken McNuggets come from? So we're familiar with the idea that that we're elders. Yeah, it's great. Thank you for that. I actually hear that as an acknowledgement, and thank you for that. I'm glad that we exceeded your expectations.
and, and I and I think I'm also like pointing to I don't know, there's a question in there, like I know that there are subcultures that are trying to rebuild that role in the world, in a culture that's generally about like what are you producing today? That's contrary to that role, which is like who are you being and how are you serving with your wisdom?
yeah,
Um,
Tercy actually had a vision years and years and years ago about being this. Well, you should tell the vision, so, since you told it.
You mean
You're on the outside of town.
yeah, I was living, it was this vision where I was this woman on the outskirts of town, and the powers that be came, like, riding out on horseback, and they said, we notice that people are coming out to see you and they're leaving empowered, and you have to tell us what you're doing, or we're going to, like, sacrifice you in the marketplace. And then, the next vision was this man, the back of a man next to a back of a son, and you could see the woman was being sacrificed in the marketplace. And the awareness was that she had passed on this secret to her son, but really the secret was nothing. Like, you actually do nothing. You just be with people, sit with
Be present.
people, be present with people, stop trying to fix them and change them. You just love people the way they are. And, I think that we've grown up in kind of this, everyone needs to be fixed or changed or look a particular way or act a particular way. And I think that's probably caused way more damage than benefit. And that if we could just listen to people and be with people and accept people for the way that they are, we would have a much more powerful impact.
Anyway, she's a woman that lives 5 miles outside of town, and people come out here to get empowered by her, and so it's happening. It's happening. It's fulfilled.
yeah,
The vision is fulfilled.
those dreams and visions. Watch out.
That's right.
Well, thank you
Well,
so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for empowering us today through this conversation. And Adam, I mean, I'm coming out to Be Love in June, and hopefully Adam and I can come out and do something there as well and just spend some time in person. And just so
Great.
grateful for all of your stories and everything that you bring.
Well, and we appreciate the invitation. Thank you so much for reaching out.